Hello and welcome to Coffee and Catholics, a Catholic women's talk show podcast. I'm Stacy, one of your hosts, and with me I have...
Hi, I'm Alisha.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Lauren.
Hello and welcome to Coffee and Catholics. This week we are talking with Alexandra Greeley. She's an author, and we're talking about food and faith with her today. Welcome, Alexandra.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and talking about my favorite topic, food and faith.
Oh, us too. We all have in common.
What a coincidence.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a Catholic convert, and when I joined my parish in Virginia, my then pastor let me start a garden and some cooking classes. And the cooking classes were the basis of the first cookbook I wrote. And then I also write for the National Catholic Register about food and faith. So that really got me involved in the whole aspect of cooking and faith and how people honestly worship God through food. I mean, we wouldn't survive without food. So
That's beautiful.
it's a very critical element in our life.
Yeah, I read a little bit about the garden and that in the cooking classes you had started, and how like you were wasn't it a garden for helping feed the needy or through Catholic charities
Yes.
or something? Yeah.
I donated for the first few years. I went to Catholic charities, but they moved it from one place out to a big warehouse, and that's where we took the food out. And it was very productive. One year we had 1,400 pounds of fresh produce, which is a lot.
Yes. That's just so wonderful. I love that, just like that grassroots thing there at the parish, and just really incorporating the community in that. It's just beautiful.
We also had a farmer's market on the church grounds, so people could walk into church. There were people who would take them on a guided tour of the church after they buy food or before they buy food. So it was always connecting food and faith. That was my great proposal to do this. My parish priest was really wonderful. He let me do all of this. So it was great.
That
Right.
sounds wonderful. And then you, with the National Catholic Register, and then for preparing for the current book that you have written, I know you've just interviewed so many different people, and I know here at our podcast we're very big, about conversation and really incorporating our faith with everything that we do. So tell us a little bit about the just some of the people you've met with and talked with, and I just love to hear these stories.
Oh, it's been wonderful. I've been doing this for about 3 years, and I interview Catholics all over. They're either cookbook writers, farmers, or priests, or home cooks who are very well known for what they do. And I've really interviewed some fascinating people. They've all been fascinating, but like there's the Catholic priest in Wyoming who does cooks for people, but he rides his horse to different parishes because he's way out in the country. I mean, I've interviewed people like that. It's just been, when I interviewed Father Leo Padalinghug, which is really amazing. He's a fascinating person. So I've been very blessed to be able to do this. It's just been a great teaching lesson because I'm a convert, and I've learned a great deal about Catholicism from a very different angle, I think, than most people do from the kitchen. That's how I've learned about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and when you've done these, I'm just curious, when you've done these interviews, have you been able to do these interviews over food and gotten to experience the different foods from the different, the people that you've interviewed?
I'm sorry, how do I experience it? Well, I've interviewed people all over the United States. I mean, not just in the Virginia area. And I asked them how they become Catholic and why they got involved with food. And their stories have been really very fascinating, like the Catholic cowboy who cooks for parishioners and runs the cattle around. So
I think what Alisha's kind of alluding to, and I could be wrong, but correct me if I am, is if you've gotten to try any of these dishes that you've presented, like in this book or in some of your other writings.
In the cookbook, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Not what is on the newspaper, not in the Catholic Register. I don't test those recipes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming they're all good. But, I hope. But for the cookbook, yes. For the cooking with the saints, there were so many recipes. I had a lot of parishioners help me cook them. And then for this last cookbook, it was, far fewer recipes, and I tested them myself. That was much easier. And I had a friend who helped me too, so because writing that book was a lot of work.
Yeah.
It really was.
You can tell the level and the skill in your storytelling and in your writing is beautiful. You're able to make these cultures come alive, and you make the reader want to connect more with their own history as a person. When I was reading these stories of all these different people from all over the world, and I didn't get to read all of it, but the ones that I read, the thing that struck me the most is that there are I think sometimes as Americans, we get in this little idea that we're the only ones out there, and that Catholicism is only a Catholic American version of Catholicism. But your book helps crack that open to show how Catholicism is so deep and beautiful in all these different cultures, in all these different expressions all over the world, and that unites us as Christians in a new way over food, which is something that we don't always have a connection to each other with. So what you're doing is a really interesting way to unify Catholics all over the world. I just think it's really neat.
Well, thank you. For me, it was really eye-opening because, as I said, I was a convert, and I had absolutely no idea how profoundly devoted to Catholicism so many people were in so many different countries. Mm-hmm. And I interviewed them all, of course, and sent them back a copy of their profile to make sure everything I wrote about them was correct. But it was fascinating to see how devout they were as Catholic. I had no idea. I mean, I was a convert. I didn't know. It was a very great learning experience. It really was.
And as somebody who married into a farming family, and we actually we've started our own vineyard and things, I kind of stuck to the farming section of your book. But one of the things that really struck me and I just loved was the quote, "Eating as a moral act." Eating is truly a moral act. And I just love that because I think a lot of times people don't make that connection of farm to table and what when we talk about being good stewards of the earth and how important farmers are to that and how they have to take care of their livestock and how they have to care for the plants that they are nurturing so that we can all eat. And so I really loved that section of your book and how that connected to how we as Catholics should be good stewards of the gifts that God gives us, including our food.
Well, the book was dedicated to James Ennis, who is the director of Catholic Rural Life, and he is profoundly dedicated to supporting Catholic farmers in rural sections. He really is he's an amazing man. He really is.
Yeah, I've definitely been more interested in learning more about that organization since reading your book also. So.
You should interview him, for heaven's sake.
I should.
There you go.
I think well too.
This is in the same, I think, section that Stacy was just talking about, but I had written down a quote after reading one of the sections, and it really connected to what Lauren had said. I just loved it. It was just as the meal of the Eucharist binds us all in the church, we are also connected through the earthly food we eat. And I just thought, that is so true. And that, we are connected through the Eucharist, but also through our meals. Like, that's something we all have to do. We all have to eat. Mm-hmm. And like Lauren said, you're all, where you interviewed people from all over the world. And that's something that we all have, we can all come together and do together is, eat.
That's what God gave us, was the food to survive.
Exactly.
And we should be grateful. That's why you should talk to Jim Ennis at the Catholic Rural Life. He's an amazing man. He really is. Amazing. And what he's doing is saving our farmers, saving our rural farmers.
Well, and it makes me think about, like, in Scripture, you read about how Jesus, he comes together with people over food all the time. Mm-hmm. Multiplying the loaves and the fish for everyone, like really caring about not only our souls, but our bodily well-being as well. And how that just, I think that personalized him so much to people because, he was a human being, he was fully man. And so he was able to partake in that, and that while also revealing that he was going to feed us with himself. Mm-hmm. And so I think what this sounds like to me is a very Christ-like thing to try to bring people together over food, because that's what he did.
Well, another thing that I really loved was in one of the sections, you talked about a farmer who had a kind of an internship program where they showed people how to do this, how to be good stewards of the animals and things.
Jesse's great, right?
Yes.
Yes, he's a wonderful. You should talk to him too.
We got a long list now from this one.
But I loved how he then talked about, like, we want to follow God in the spirit of humility and practice of the Catholic faith, and our role is to love God and our neighbors and to thank God for all he has given us. And he continued to talk about how part of thanking God is by sharing by training others to be stewards of our earth also.
Absolutely. Oh, he's well, there's so many of the farmers were really fascinating, but Jesse Strait is amazing. He lives not very far away in Northern Virginia, and his farm is beautiful, and he is a very devout Catholic, really. He's an amazing man. And he has a food store where you can go in and buy products that he grows. And he makes deliveries, too. He's that kind of man. You should really interview him, seriously.
Tell us what you're working on now, because you seem like a person who is always thinking, and creating, and just working through stories and thinking about stories. Do you have any projects in the works right now that you're working on?
Yes, I always continue to write for the Register for Catholic Exchange, but I've also started writing for Legatus and Regnum. I guess that's
Regnum?
They asked me to do a book review. And I've sent in a book proposal to a local publishing house called Cooking with the Priest, because many of the priests I've interviewed in the Register are cooks, like Father Hathaway, who was the priest who brought me into the church in the first place. But he does a wonderful cooking show for his parish. So I hope that they will accept the proposal, because he's terrific, and the book would be dedicated to him. I used to cook for him when he was at my parish. At the rectory, I cooked for him 80 different times. And I always had to hand him a menu beforehand. He'd go through, and I want this dish, and I want this dish, and I want this dish. He's a real foodie, so I hope they take
Oh, that sounds like a wonderful idea. Yeah, and I know you have another book, Cooking with the Saints, that has and I know, like, in my own family, I like to add in, like, little liturgical touches. Not quite so complicated as some of the recipes that were in there. I mean, some of them are fairly simple, and some of them were little more out of my comfort zone. But, like, I do things like maybe for, like, one of my favorite ones was for St. Lucie Day, having chocolate eyeballs, because I have 4 boys, and they thought that was hilarious. But do you have any favorite liturgical meals?
Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She's in Rita Steiniger, who's in this book. Her house looks like a Catholic retreat house. She's devoted to Our Lady of Guadalupe, and she always cooks every holy feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. She has a feast for friends, and her cooking is amazing, and the food is amazing. So that's, I guess, Mexican food, Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Yes.
I could do that every day. Doesn't matter.
Celebrate Our Lady every day.
I have a question for you. This love for food and this passion for food came from somewhere in your life. What is your story of how you fell in love with food or connected this love and sweetness in your soul to become this incredible apostolate? Like, what is your story?
When I lived in Hong Kong for 4 years, and my last year there, the editor of the South China Morning Post asked me to be their food writer, and it changed me entirely, because it started me in a whole different world of looking at food in a foreign country. And I wrote excessively, many times a week, and I went to sample food from all over, and even I went to mainland China as well. And when I came back to the United States, I got a job working for Time Life Cookbook series, and that really cemented me into my cooking life. That's how it really got started. I was living in Hong Kong. Whoever would have guessed that would happen? I was one of the few American women I think they ever hired to do something like that. So it was quite a life-changing time. It really was. Anything else you want me to tell you?
Do you want to share a little bit about your conversion story? I would love to hear that.
I was, I don't know if you know what a Baha'i is, but I was a Baha'i beforehand.
I do know what that is, yeah.
And I went to my physical therapist at the time was Catholic, and she said to me that she was going to go on a pilgrimage, a Catholic pilgrimage. And I said, well, tell me about Catholicism, because I knew nothing. And the words she said next changed my life. She said, it is the one true faith God gave mankind. It was on an late October afternoon. It was like I saw lightning. And the next day, I contacted 2 different parishes in my diocese and started going to RCIA classes. That's what happened.
Wow, that quick.
What a beautiful spirit of openness to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
It was amazing, and it was life-changing. That moment was life-changing. And then, of course, when I was going, one of the RCA classes were being held at St. Veronica, where Father Hathaway was, and he met me in the hall, and he said, well, you're taking RCA classes. What have you been? And I said, I was a Baha'i. And he said, what? What is a Baha'i? Of course, he knew what it was, but he was being funny. So.
Well, for those of us who don't know, like, I don't know what a Baha'i is, and so was that like a pretty radical conversion, like from like one train of thought?
It's from Iran, and it's a kind of gentle version of Islam, and they're very, I suppose they're basically in their view of life very Christian in their way. Of course, they're not Christian, but they would never murder anybody. They don't kill their enemies. They're very loving and accepting of others. Becoming Catholic really changed my life, and Baha'is are very nice people, but Catholicism is very different. So, very life-changing event, really was.
Wow!
At that afternoon, one true faith God gave mankind. I think of those words often.
It sounds like you had sort of an Apostle Paul moment, like where just this one statement and the scales fell, and you could see what you needed to do. That's incredible.
I think that's a good way of describing it. It really was an Apostle Paul moment. It changed my life. And then poor Father Hathaway had to deal with this. When I joined the parish after I went through the classes, I went up to him. I was still somewhat of a stranger there, and I said, can I do some cooking classes? And he looked at me, cooking classes? What do you want to do that for? But he let me do it. So
that's so cool.
I did tell him what I wanted to do, and he thought it was great. So I did it for 7 years.
Wow.
So I have always thought of myself as having like a black thumb, but I know you spoke in your book about how like gardening is like good for the soul, and like I don't garden at all, and I know you started this garden with your parish, and I'd see good in gardening. What would you say to somebody who seemingly hates gardening about how to incorporate, somehow, start that or incorporate the beauty of gardening into their life when it's not there right now?
But gardening, especially if you're growing vegetables, flowers, I suppose, is one thing. But our garden was a vegetable garden, and you think of you're feeding other people, or you're feeding yourself, you're feeding your family, and it's a way to act out what God wants us to do, is to feed ourselves with the earth that He's given us, the product that He's given us, and that's what gardening is. Vegetable gardening is about. Well, you're a farmer, so you know.
Yeah. We've got just about another month, and we'll be tilling the garden for potatoes and onions.
How does it grow? What do you grow?
That's a loaded question. Potatoes, onions, carrots, spinach. You name it, and we probably have grown something. Beets are a big one in our garden. Asparagus, yeah.
You just started a vineyard.
And we just started a vineyard, yeah. So,
well, see, and I started gardening last year for the first time. Actually, stuck with it, and my husband and I are planning on doing another one this year, and really trying to grow it. And I've been trying to tap into Stacy's knowledge a little bit, because
it's really my husband's knowledge.
Okay, there you go. So I'm trying to get through to him through you, but yeah, I think it's really fun too, because when people come over who haven't been to our house before, like we get to go out there and get to tell them all about what we're growing, and it's exciting. I don't know, and it seems like even if people aren't really interested in gardening, they're still fascinated by the concept of like what all it is that you can grow and what's involved in it, because it is a very tedious process.
things together, bringing people together.
Yeah, which we've talked about on the podcast when I did talk about my vineyard, how it's brought like our homeschool community, and even some of the ladies here have come out, and we planted 300 grapes, and all these people came from Tulsa or from our homeschool groups come out and help us dig the holes for the plants and to get them planted and watered and.
This is like something that you could maybe write a story about.
Stacy, I want to know, could I interview you for the Catholic Register?
Yes, she would love that.
I'll email you and ask you a good time to do a phone interview. How's that?
That sounds great.
Yay!
Food and faith, that's what I write about, food and faith.
I know.
So that would be
This would be
wonderful.
so
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
That's so fun.
Well, are there any other like big questions you guys had? Because I have one like kind of small one, but I was thinking I'll wait till the end.
I wasn't really going to ask a question, but I was just going to say, just thinking about the gardening and whatnot, and how, like for instance, like we have chickens, and so when we get a surplus amount of eggs and we can't, have them all because they're all going to go bad, we can give those things away. And when you have like a bigger garden. And, if feeding yourself is wonderful, feeding your family is great, but you have more, you can give that out to other people. And it's a way, I think, of giving, like kind of, I don't know, just trying to expand that generosity through your own hard work and whatnot. And so I love the concept of all of this, connecting food with faith. So.
My last kind of question for you is just kind of, what's your favorite dish? Out of all the dishes you have cooked or published or even privately have made yourself, what's your favorite dish that you've made?
Tacos, Mexican tacos.
You can't go wrong with tacos.
It's everyone's favorite.
I grew up in California, and that's what we ate a lot of. So that's my home food. It's tacos. I love that. And frijoles. Those are my basic foods. I'm sorry, it doesn't sound very sophisticated.
Oh no,
I love that.
Well, and I actually kind of love it because like it's simple and yet it's filling and it's delicious, just like Jesus and our faith are simple and delicious and just and comforting. You said it's kind of like your comfort food, and that's again tying faith into food. I think that's beautiful.
And you'll instantly see every time, like what you just said, when people describe their favorite food, they connect it back to their childhood. Mm-hmm. And we have such a responsibility as Catholics to help our children make these connections between their faith and their history and food. And you're going to help us do that. And I totally have a giant food crush on you. And I want to be just like you when I grow up.
And I really want a taco.
I want her tacos.
You're very kind. I hope I've been helpful to you.
Thank you.
And just so our listeners know, the new book that we did reference several times during the podcast tonight was, or today, was Catholics in the Kitchen, Nurturing the Bond Between Faith and Food. So if some of the things that we talked about tonight sounded interesting to you, you might check out that book by Alexandra.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to chat with you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be talking to you. And Stacy, I'm going to contact you.
All right. And
okay.
Thank you so much for your time, and I'm glad we were able to connect.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful the evening, the rest of the night. Have a wonderful time.
You too.
God bless you. God bless you.
God bless you. Good night.
Good night.
And as always, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Join us again in 2 weeks. Until then, may God bless you and may Mary accompany you. Coffee and Catholics is a proud partner of the Smart Catholics Podcast Network. Find new shows to love, meet like-minded Catholics, and join the community at smartcatholics.com.